All right, it is Wednesday evening. It is just before 6, leaving the office here. Got a good topic. I like this one. Thank you for submitting this in the comments. We're going to be talking about taking risks early in your career. I think this is a super cool one. We'll dive into that in just a moment. I'm still stuck in this courtesy shuttle. It's not a shuttle, I guess. It's a courtesy vehicle. There we go. It sucks. I'm super swamped at work this entire week, but they did just call me, so I'm hoping they have an update and I can go swap the vehicle and actually get the SUV back, which would be nice. And then we'll be back in style and not this X1. Anyway, that's coming. I had a funny exchange with my skip level manager. He's an awesome guy. He's very down to earth, which is great. And he's making a joke about, said something about my podcast. So I was saying, oh no, like my live streams are on Monday, because he's actually shown up on one of the live streams that I've done, which is super cool. And he said, no, like the commute one. So I guess he's seen me post about Code Commute, which you're watching right now. So I thought that was pretty funny. So I've been at the office every day this week, and I said, yeah, I'm getting a lot of a lot of Code Commute episodes in. So I'll be back in tomorrow. So a lot more content. So a reminder to folks, if you want topics and stuff covered, just add them in the comments. Happy to try and go over them. If people are asking stuff that I've already made content about, I'm going to start just trying to link it. But over time, like there's probably going to be some repeat. I'll try to give a fresh perspective and stuff like that. So if you want it to be anonymous, please just find me on social media, DevLeader. That's my primary sort of channel and personal brand. Just send me a message, say, hey, I'd love if you could talk about this and keep it anonymous. And the more detail that you can provide, the better. It helps me, provide more targeted kind of feedback and perspective on things. So with that said, let's get into the topic, because apparently people don't like that I ramble, even though I'm going to be sitting in traffic for 51 minutes. Buckle up, friends. Okay, so let's talk about taking risks earlier in your career. I think this is, to start things off, something that's going to be very different for every individual. And the reason I say that is because everyone has a different risk tolerance, okay? I'm going to be eating at the same time, so too bad. I'm hungry. And I'm in at the office all day. So everyone's going to have different risk tolerance. So for me to describe a scenario and say, oh, like this is a good level of risk or whatever, you might absolutely disagree with that. That might make you feel super uncomfortable. And you might hear things I'm saying that I'm like, oh, that's risky. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, that's not risky at all. It's going to be different for everyone. I regret biting into this thing because now it's super chewy. So, some framing for this that I think is interesting is actually finance related. And if you are someone that's looked at investing and whatever else, like there's an interesting perspective around this where if you are younger, you have more opportunity to take risks, especially with like investments and stuff, because if something doesn't pan out, so you put money into something and it doesn't pan out, I gotta do this, man. Sorry, this intersection's super crappy. If you put money into something when you're young and it doesn't pan out, the reality is like you have many years ahead of you to try and compensate for that, right? And it could be just a drop in the bucket. So just to give you an example, when you're younger, so you had $1,000 and you were like, man, like I've been saving up, I got $1,000. I'm going to put all that into whatever. And it's like kind of a risky move, but it might have like potentially high upside. $1,000 when you're a lot younger might seem like a lot, but like when you're older and whatever, you might say, well, that's actually nothing. And I don't mean to minimize that. I'm just giving you an example, right? You might say, yeah, if I today, and it's been 30 years, like if I were to do the same thing with $1,000, like sure, it would suck to lose $1,000, but you might not miss it. So if you're able to take risks earlier, they might have a higher upside because they're riskier. And if they go south, then it's not going to be like devastating, right? You got lots of time to recoup. So I think we can maybe take a similar approach or a similar perspective when it comes to careers, potentially. Again, this is going to depend on you and your risk tolerance, but I think there's an opportunity to think about it this way. And they're throttling the highway, so that's a good sign. For the record, on any code commute video that I've done on the way home, this highway has never been throttled to get onto, which means it's about to be some bullshit coming up. So I'm probably going to get pissed off. So one of the comments regarding this when it was submitted was around like, hey, like I have an opportunity or opportunities at, larger companies, which is great. Like, so congrats to this person. That's awesome to hear. And they're kind of noodling around this idea of like, should I go with that? Because it seems like it's, man, this guy's a jerk. Because it seems like a safer kind of thing to do, right? Larger company, probably lower risk of like the company not panning out or whatever. So should I just go do that, right? Like this feels like a pretty stable path. Or they said like, I have a friend that wants to try doing a startup. And for you, this might look different, right? You might say like, should I be applying to big companies versus not? Like kind of just like weighing out these different possibilities where generally speaking, a startup is probably riskier than a larger company that's more established, just inherently. There's always someone who's going to listen to what I'm saying and they're like, no, like you're not safe at a big company, they'll lay you off. And I'm like, okay, sure. The point is that the likelihood of a big company at least being able to survive versus a startup that's very fresh, that doesn't even have like an established product or something, that's probably statistically going to be riskier. That's all I'm saying. So, do you entertain this? Do you go the route of the risky startup, or you go for the cushy job? Now, I think it's very interesting because I know I was saying it's going to be highly dependent from person to person in terms of risk tolerance, but I also think it's going to depend on you as an individual and what you can get out of these. So to give you an example, because I think the risk tolerance thing is probably obvious. I hope it's obvious to people, but if you're the kind of person who needs a lot of structure and having routine and structure and I don't know, just a lot more order in what's going on, like slower moving order, this kind of stuff, you might find that like being at a larger company feels like you can be more effective. And it feels that way because it's very much aligned with like how you approach going about things. And that's not good or bad or anything. It's just like, if that's how you align with things, that might be a good fit for you. And to start your career off that way, setting yourself up in an environment like that, you might say, this is actually great. And I can grow and be successful and do well at this because I have this environment that's very conducive to how I approach things. Now, let's take the exact opposite. And actually, I think that I am this other category, which is like a bit more chaos, a bit more uncertainty. I feel like when I am given ownership, autonomy, and a good problem to solve, like I will work my butt off. And it's not because someone's making me do it. It's like that's like what I need to thrive. But I know that about myself. Like I don't like being under pressure, but apparently apparently I am very motivated by that kind of situation. So these are things like you learn about yourself, right? You might know this already for yourself, and man, this is a disaster. Come on, buddy, get in here. Whew. You can't see the lanes, but if you're familiar, well, I never know. I don't know if you guys can see or understand where I am on my drive home, but this is one of the spots where it's like 2 lanes on the right merging with the left, but it's also an exit, and I have to line up in this exit. So I'm merging right when I have 2 lanes on the right merging left, and my exit's backed up. This is going to be hell. So I very much do better under all sorts of stress and chaos. I'm not saying that I like that feeling, because I don't like being stressed out. My wife would probably say that she disagrees that I do. I must like being stressed out because I do it to myself. But I seem to be more effective, not only in terms of productivity when I have all sorts of stuff going on, but like something about it is like a forcing function that I need to start structuring things, and that allows me to be effective. Now, that's something I wanted to get out of the way first of all, because as we're talking about taking risks and stuff like that, something to think about with approaching a startup versus a bigger company, I think you want to think through this. Now, you could be at a big company in a team that operates very much like a startup, and it's a little bit more chaotic, and then maybe you have a really good mix between the two, right? You get some of that safety net from the big company, right? And then you're in a small team, so it's kind of scrappy and kind of chaotic, and so that could be cool, right? So there's no right or wrong answer here. This is just something to think about. And if you've done some introspection, you might know this about yourself. If you don't know this about yourself yet, like as you go forward, say you haven't got a job yet, you're watching this and you're like, hey, like this is helpful because I'm trying to think where I want to go, how I want to approach it. This might be something you learn about yourself. And if you get it wrong the first time and you're like, oh man, like I went into a startup and it's too chaotic, I wish I had structure. Like, great. You just started your career. At least you learned this about yourself. So I think that that's a helpful thing, even if it feels like you made a mistake or it's suboptimal. If you have awareness around this, it can be great. Okay, so one of the things that I think is interesting is that when we think about startups versus a big company, if we go back to the finance side of things, and this is, again, it's not a rule, it's just like a generalization here. Especially at big tech companies, generally people get attracted to the idea of a big tech company because they'll see the salaries published. They're like, oh, like the software developers make that much. Like, oh, I want that because, if I go there, like I'll be set and like things are going to be great. And I mean, there's other companies that still pay plenty. So it's not like you have to be at big tech for a crazy salary or something like that. But it generally seems like people look at big tech and they go, oh, or larger companies, and they go, great, okay, more stable, and I have this like potential for a consistently pretty high salary. Like that's a good spot to be, right? It's comfortable. The situation is comfortable. Now, when you look at a startup, it might look very much the inverse of that, where you're like, I think the example from the comments was sort of like, and I might have this wrong, so I apologize if I read your comment before I started blabbing here. But it could be like, yeah, like this startup that I'm going to go do with my friend, like, yeah, I might not get paid. I might not have an income from it. But like the upside, this is where it's interesting, right? The upside could be wild. It's super high risk. And I don't mean that because like I think this person's incapable or something. Just statistically, starting a tech company, starting any company, has a lot of risk associated with it. And if you've never done it before, the risk is even higher, right? A lot of people that have had successful companies have failed many times, but people only ever see the success at the end, right? So this person might be taking a huge risk. But if it does succeed, pardon me, I have to cough. If it does succeed, then the upside's huge. Now, when we think about a big tech company or a larger company, unless you're NVIDIA, like yes, there's upside. Like, you know, for example, since I've joined Microsoft a few years back, like, yes, the stock price has gone up and it's done very well. That's great. But it didn't 10x, it didn't 100x, it didn't like go to the moon kind of thing. And to give you an example, when I was at a startup before Microsoft, I left before they IPO'd. This guy's an absolute jackass. Like, who do you think you are, bypassing all this traffic? What a schmuck. Anyway, I left before they IPO'd. Like, I wouldn't have to work again in my life if I had been there and exited like when the stars aligned, right? So the opportunity for upside can be immense at a larger company, because the likelihood of having like this ridiculous growth where it's like, you know, orders of magnitude, like multiplier kind of thing going on, it's a lower likelihood. But the good news is it's probably, for the most part, going to do pretty well. It's probably going to continue to grow. So it's like, it's a good spot to be. It's comfortable. So these are things to consider. If you are younger, the reason I wanted to bring up the finance thing is like, if you're younger, if you try doing this startup and it fails after a year, I mean, like, financially speaking, so what? Right? And I don't mean to minimize, like, yeah, you're going to need to find a way to, like, pay for food and, like, to stay alive. But, like, if you could live at your parents' house and you can save money doing whatever, and then you can be putting your effort into doing a startup, like, that could be a super cool opportunity. And if it fails after a year, after 2 years, and you're like, okay, like, didn't work, we got to go back to the drawing board. Maybe you go get jobs at companies. Maybe you try another startup. The point is, like, if that fails, financially speaking, I would think that should not be something that derails your life financially, maybe emotionally. I'm just kidding. But the experience, because this is the segue I want to get into, the experience at these things is something else that I really want you to think about. Now, again, this is a huge sweeping generalization. I've talked about this kind of stuff before. My own experience, so this is my bias here, my experience has led me to kind of have this observation that at big tech or larger companies, you have this opportunity to be surrounded by people that are experts in their domain. Okay, so you will have people that are like very senior level architects. They've been programming for 1,000 years. They built all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, the opportunity to be around very, very smart, successful people. And I'm using the word successful as in like successful in their career, not like they won the lottery and they have so much money. I just mean like in their craft, they've done very well. There are more people, so there is more likelihood for you to be around people that are very exceptional. So again, if we think about you as an individual, if you're around these people, is that some type of opportunity that you would take to like to try and learn from them? To try and see, like, can I get time from them? Can I, like, you almost have more access to them because you work at the same place. Now, I'm not saying you go join a company and then you just go, message every single person that's more senior than you and whatever. I'm just saying, like, the proximity of these people is something that you might be able to leverage and kind of help you learn and grow, which is really cool. There's a lot of really cool opportunity for that. Now, conversely, at a startup, and like, let's see, this is going to sound terrible, so I'm not trying to be rude here, but if we take this individual's example, it's like, yeah, my buddy wants to go start a startup with me, and we have an idea, and we can go build this. Like, again, I'm looking for a nice way to say this. The footprint of highly exceptional people is probably significantly smaller. Not to say that your friend is not exceptional, but I just mean, like, if they're also new to this, like, in contrast to what I was just saying, you have a much smaller footprint. So, it's not that there's anything wrong with that, okay? So, being at a larger company may position you to be around more exceptional people. Being at a startup may still position you to be around successful people, but the footprint of the number of people is smaller. Now that can play into your favor, okay? So I want to give you a counter example to I'm not trying to pick on the person in the comments, I'm sorry. But a counter example, I had an internship, and the internship was really cool for me. I got to go to San Jose, so I'm originally from around like the Toronto area in Canada, and so I went to San Jose for this internship, which was super cool. And I worked at this company as a startup, and founders are basically like serial entrepreneurs. They had worked oh man, I'm just piecing this together. I am pretty sure they were at NVIDIA before, which is hilarious now that I'm thinking about that. So I'm sure they've done even more well than I originally thought. Anyway, brilliant people. Absolutely brilliant. So very small footprint, but the percentage of like very brilliant people was super high. This person's not letting me zipper merge. What a schmuck. It goes to one lane, buddy. Really? You absolute imbecile. No problem. We'll just pull up. People don't understand how zipper merging works. I have the camera off me so you can watch. See this vehicle coming up? Okay, lady. You're gonna get home quicker? Okay. There you go. Dummy. Hope you're happy. Okay, this is my least favorite part of the highway, by the way. And how much time we got left? Only 47 minutes now. It's been a week, man. So I was at this company that had very intelligent people, awesome mentors, just like, again, like saturated with like excellence, which is super cool. So the opportunities are there. right? So this idea of going to a startup could allow you to be around really, really awesome people, but your mileage may vary. I want to get away from this stupid Range Rover. Pissing me off. Oh, we're getting there. Oh, come on, one more lane. Oh, freedom. With all 2 cylinders of this X1, we're free in the fast lane. I can't tell you how good this feels. Okay, back on track. So when you're thinking about this decision, right, you may want to make a decision to prioritize being at a larger company because you're like, in terms of a growth perspective, you feel, and it's not right or wrong, right? You feel that if you can be around statistically more people that may be operating at a higher level, and you feel that you can achieve that at a larger company because there's more people, therefore more individuals that are going to be operating at a higher level, that might be a decision you make, right? Now, it's just something that you have to like feel out, I think, and every one of these situations is going to be so different. So like it almost feels like, as I'm talking about this, I don't want it to come across at all like you pick one of these and this is the expectation that you should have, right? Aside from saying something like startups are statistically much more risk. Like, I think that's a fair statement. But I'm not trying to say like you're not going to have awesome people at a startup. I'm just trying to say that if you had 100 people or 200 people or 500 people, the number of people that could be really amazing, there's a higher likelihood that there will be more of them just because there's more people. That's all I'm saying. So something to think about. Okay. From a growth perspective, a couple things to think about. At large companies, you will have a couple things going on to consider. You may have this, I don't know a good way to put it, like there's going to be generally like more established career progression, okay? So like at Microsoft, there's a very well put together like leveling system, right? Amazon, Facebook, like, and then companies that aren't that scale but still big, they have established leveling systems, right? You'll hear like, oh, a staff engineer, a principal engineer, senior, like there's these different levels that you can grow in your career. And if you're thinking about your career being something where like I do plan on working for different companies over time and I want to, be able to experience different places, then having something like established levels could be very helpful. And that's more, again, like there's some comfort in knowing if I go to a company that has a leveling system like that, I can at least start to establish a baseline of my level within the software engineering industry. Now, again, I'm saying a baseline. You might say, well, Nick, it's different everywhere, and I totally get it. But if you're, moving up to like, say you're like a staff or principal level engineer somewhere, it's very unlikely that some other place is going to say, nah, like you're only junior here. There's some wiggle room in the middle of these levels for sure. So don't get me wrong, but at least you have some opportunity for a bit of level setting. Now at startups, so to give you an example where I used to work, we were years into it before we started introducing even like senior. And by the time I left, it was only like developer or senior for the engineers, right? That's what existed. There was no level 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, just that's all you had. Even for myself, I've talked about this in the video earlier today or recently, that like there was no, I was a technical manager and they didn't have we had not created a director level position that was technical. So my peers that were managers like me, except I was a air quotes technical manager, my peers that were managers could get promoted into director level roles because the career path existed at the company. There was no career path above a technical manager. So I could not receive a different title. Now, to be very transparent, I did not care about the title. I did not care because I knew that the work I was doing at this company, like, this isn't like bragging or boasting. This is just kind of, it's factual. Like, I was spending a lot of my time going between teams because I was a resource that they could leverage between these teams to be helpful. So I was a very useful person, but the title doesn't really matter to me. They call me whatever you want because I know that I'm doing good work. Like, if you're going to compensate me and I'm doing good work and you're giving me that autonomy to do good stuff, call me anything you want. I don't care. But this kind of changed for me, right? Because by having this philosophy where I'm like, I just don't care what the title is, what does that mean when I go to apply to somewhere else? Right? What does that mean? So to give you an example, like I had so I actually started off as a team lead because we didn't have a manager title, but I was managing between 13 people, I think up to 17 at one point, very early on, and for a brief amount of time. And I had comp view and I was doing one-on-ones. I had a manager role, but we just didn't have the title. I'm like, I don't care. And at one point, they switched and they said, we're gonna make you a manager. And I said, oh, what does that change? And they said, just the title. I remember it because the way it was presented to me was like, it's kind of funny actually. It was like, you're getting promoted. Oh, so compensation change? No compensation change. Oh, so my responsibilities change? No. Oh, okay. We're changing your title. It's now technical manager. Man, these people drive me nuts. And moving into the lane that's going to end so they can move ahead a few cars, like, oh my God, just get a grip. Get a grip. At least I will let them zipper merge because I don't drive oh, that's not how you zipper merge. That's not how you do it. I'll let you in because I'm not like the lady in the Range Rover. Or better than that. I will let you in. But don't be stupid next time. That's what stupid people do. So, the title thing might be something you want to factor in. I never cared until I went outside of this company, right? So going to apply into big tech positions, I just remember thinking, like, I had an aha moment where I was like, oh man, like, that's why people care about titles. Because if I have a title and I'm trying to go somewhere else, I can now say, like, this is what my title was there, right? Like, it becomes don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that just because you make up a title means you have whatever experience, but it certainly does help. At least at a bare minimum, it will help you on your application to be able to say, look, I had this title. Someone's going to say, oh, well, that sounds, again, on the surface, we haven't done the interview, that sounds like it's impressive. So it's tricky. Like, imagine, just to give you an example, if the company I was at before, if they would have had the director level position and I had been given that, if I said, I'm a director at this company that has 250 people, I can assure you that looks better than just saying, I'm a technical manager. And you know what would have happened? If they would have given me the title if we had it, my responsibilities wouldn't have changed, right? So this is why I never cared. Because I'm like, I'm doing good work, things are good. It's just a title. So I do recommend that people think about this, because I feel kind of silly that I never really got it. But that might be something if you're like, well, I'm going to go start a startup. Okay. So if that startup fails, and again, I'm not trying to curse your startup, I actually do hope you tons of success. I hope anyone who's listening to this or watching this, like I want you to be successful, obviously. Okay, so please don't get that the wrong way. I want everyone to be successful. Even the stupid lady in the Range Rover that can't zipper merge. I want people to be successful. But the likelihood of failing a startup is very high. So if you go 1 year and your startup doesn't succeed, okay, so now you've gone from finishing school, because I believe this person said that they were in school and finishing. You finish school 1 year. What's your job title? Right? Like you don't have the title from the company because it was a startup and that wasn't a thing. And then if you try it again, now it's 2 years in, you don't have sort of the formal title. So again, I'm not saying that this is something where I'm like, oh, you need to go get the title. I'm just telling you to think about this, because I never cared and I never thought about it. So other people who are working at these other companies where there is a leveling system, they may be able to show after some period of time, hey, like my level went from X to Y, demonstrated growth. Now they have some title that they can kind of bring around with them on their resume to say, hey, look, see? And you may not have that if you go into either starting your own company or a startup where they're like, we just need people to work hard. And that's like where I was. We just need people to work hard. What does the title really matter? Okay, so something to think about. I think we still got tons of time, because this is probably going to be one of the longest drives I've ever had on Code Commute. After a long day, I still have to work when I get home too, which is why I'm like, I'm just not happy. It's just been a long week. What's the next thing I wanted to talk about here? So I was hoping that like I'd be further along and be closer to home and kind of wrap things up, because I think that it was either this person who commented, I think so, or someone else, but someone was saying like, you could even talk about like your own journey and why you decided to like make certain decisions. So I wanted to talk about that. So I wanted to give you a bunch of general stuff up front to think about. And now I wanted to talk through like what my lens was going through it. And if there's still time, I will kind of talk about like, as a retrospective, like looking back, when I change things, and we'll see. I've kind of done this before, like this reflection, but Code Commute's always fun because I'm just rambling and kind of saying exactly what I'm thinking as it's happening. So we'll see what happens. So when I was in university, I had 6 internships. I went to the University of Waterloo. It has a co-op program, so every 4 months you go between school and work. So for me, I am pretty conservative when it comes to taking risks. And to start things off, I said, I'm going to be a software engineer. And in Canada, and this is just my personal opinion about my approach here. In Canada, at least in Ontario, to be a professional software engineer, I've talked about this a bunch before, you need to go to an accredited degree program. You need to have, I think it's 4 years of work experience under like a professional engineer that signs off on them. You need to do an ethics test. So for me, I'm saying I want to get into software engineering and I'm going to be an engineer. Like I'm going to solidify what I'm doing here to minimize risk. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to do. So going to university, it's a co-op program, and my thought process was that because I have 6 internships and every one of them's 4 months, my thought was like, I want to make sure that I'm working at places where I feel like I'm having like my work means something. And I wasn't thinking like an impact on the world. I mean, like, if I'm making something, I don't just want to be like the intern locked in a closet that no one talks to, and then like I leave after 4 months and like, what the heck happened? I'd like to be like, I don't know, like demonstrating that I'm doing a good job. Like, I want to feel that way. And to me, it felt like at a startup or a small company that I would have a better likelihood of success with that. So my very first internship, I think I thought I was applying to a startup, a very small company. I thought it was a startup. It's not really a startup. It was just a small consulting company. I don't know, like, for comparison though, like, I mean, it really did just operate like a startup. So very similar. So that was cool. In terms of like reflection on that, I thought that was a great, like, I still think it was such a good learning opportunity. It was great. Again, got very lucky with being around someone who was like an absolute amazing software engineer. Actually, this guy was a professional engineer as well. So like, truly amazing software engineer, great mentor, very smart, very, very good with people. Like, everything about, working for this individual was great. I went back there a second time. So, I thought that was still in hindsight, a great first move. I went to another company after. So, and this individual, by the way, recommended, he said, I would love if you came back for a third internship, but he's like, I also don't want you to. And he said, not because I would like say no based on your performance, but he's like, he went to the University of Waterloo as well. He said, I want you to try and make sure that you have an opportunity at other places. And so that was like a really good like reminder that like I should try out other things. So I did mention being like sort of conservative in terms of my risk taking, and for me this was de-risking. If I try other things out, because he said, when else in your career are you going to be able to go 4 months at one place to test it out? Right? Like, when will this happen? It's not. So he's like, you should do this. You should test things out and see like what you like. So I was like, that's a brilliant idea. So I had gone to a different company after. I think that I thought that it was a larger company. Like, hey, I'm trying something else out. And it ended up not being. Like, I was the only developer. And I know I joked about not being locked in a closet as an only developer. That's what I was doing. But what was really cool about this experience was like, because I was the solo dev, I felt like I could drive a lot of progress. I actually went back there a second time, and they had moved offices, and it was truly like a startup. So it was really cool. That was fun to be at. And then I was like, okay, I really do have to try out a larger company. It wasn't like, not like Microsoft or anything like that. It's a few hundred people. And so I got a feel for that. And then my last internship was the one I talked about going to San Jose for. So that was a startup. And something that like I felt like from doing all of that was that I was right, that going to for me at least, going to startups or small companies was a really good way to have this work experience where I'm like, people are seeing the work I'm doing, I'm connected with, the people that are managing me. Like, it's just a good experience overall for delivering value and getting better. So I like that a lot. So I was pretty sold on the idea of being at a startup. Outside, like when I had graduated, I kind of mentioned earlier that like startups are risky, right? Like there's this inherent risk that they could fail. And when I had joined the startup after work, it's called Magnet Forensics, by the way. So if you're curious, if I haven't said it before, it's called Magnet Forensics. It had a different name when we started there. So I remember going for the interview, talking with the founder about it. But something that really stood out to me was that he said, we're profitable with customers and we don't have any investors. So remember what I said about de-risking, right? So for me personally, I was like, okay, so there's a startup where what's the upside? We don't know. Potentially pretty big. That's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. What do startups usually have? Well, a ton of risk because like they're going to be, have investor money. We're going to burn through it. We don't have customers yet. Like we don't even know what we're building. But that wasn't the case here. It was like, we're already profitable. You don't have to worry about getting your next paycheck and not from investors, right? Like we don't need investors. We're doing good. So I was like, okay, like that actually feels pretty interesting, right? We got this lower risk startup, so low risk, potentially very high upside, or nothing, right? Like we don't know, but that's if it fails. So I'm like, this is a pretty cool opportunity. So I stayed there. And the reality is my experience at that company as it was growing was incredible. I worked a ton. No one made me, but I worked a ton. But I learned so much. So when I think about being at that company as a startup, as it grew into a small, medium-sized business, versus sort of the pace and the focus and stuff that I have at Microsoft, I personally, and this is just how I am, I kind of talked about this already, if I would have joined Microsoft, so say Microsoft hired me out of university, I think I would have stalled in my career earlier, truthfully. Because I don't think that the environment, and not a fault of Microsoft, just that it's different, I don't think the environment at Microsoft would have been conducive to like my sort of what I need for growth, especially at that time. Because I was thriving on the chaos and just like, shit's got to get done, so let's get it done. We'll find a way to do it. It's just how I roll. And like, I needed that. I didn't know I needed that. So I was very lucky. I didn't know I needed that, but I kind of learned that about myself. So being at Microsoft, now I'm older, right? As a manager at Microsoft and not a technical manager at Magnet Forensics, I don't code at work anymore. So like my responsibilities look different. Like everything about it is just different. It's not, is there chaos? Sure. Like this week, for example, there's been a little bit of chaos. But you know what's interesting? As like stressed out as I am about the chaos, it's like, I know this about myself because I lived and breathed chaos for 8 years straight. I do well in chaos. So like, this is an interesting time for me because I'm kind of entering this chaotic period and I actually think that will help me. So when I reflect on like, was it a good decision to do startups and stuff? Yeah. I wouldn't go back and change any of that for me. That might not be a good fit for you, but for me, I think I'm very happy with the decisions I made kind of on that path. Timing wise, missing an IPO, missing them get bought back to private for $2 billion. That one's probably going to sting for the rest of my life, unfortunately. Like a lot. Fuck. Yeah, it's bad. But realistically, like, I don't know, that shaped, those 8 years like shaped who I am, almost like as a person, but like certainly as how I approach development, right? From all angles. Like as a manager, I had so much autonomy to be able to kind of find my way as a manager, to kind of learn like just how to get stuff done. Like, it sounds kind of silly, but like, we had to. We had to get stuff done to survive, and we always found ways. So there's a lot of those experiences that, you know, I wouldn't trade for anything. So I wouldn't go back and change like where I started, or, you know, should I try to apply for like Microsoft, Apple, like, no. I like Microsoft. I'm not saying like anything else. So don't interpret that the wrong way. But like, in terms of what I needed for growth, definitely the path I took worked out really well. And clearly, even though I sort of missed the opportunity, the opportunity for upside was there. So now that I'm about to pull in to get home here, the takeaway is, honestly, I think you need to kind of think about your risk tolerance. Like I said at the beginning, yours will be different than other people's, so listen to yourself. I will remind you that if you're young, you got lots of time. You got lots of time. So listen to your own risk tolerance for your own happiness levels. But like, the reality is, if you mess up, you got lots of time to make it right. So let's back in to this spot here, and we'll wrap things up. So as I'm backing in, just a reminder, if you like me rambling about stuff, if you want me to ramble about a topic, just add it in the comments, or message me on social media. It'll be DevLeader. I hope you thought that was helpful in some capacity, and I'll see you next time. Take care.